They thought their German Shepherd had finally turned on their son. They had it completely backwards. The sound of a toddler's crying is the loudest silence a parent can stand. It fills every room, every thought, every second. And when it doesn't stop, it starts to feel like a verdict. Diane Mercer had been a kindergarten teacher for 9 years. She understood child behavior patterns the way a mechanic understands the sound an engine makes before it fails. She read signals. She made accurate calls. She trusted her training. That is why, when Marcus began pressing his broad head directly into her 18-month-old son Eli's crying face, she was absolutely certain she knew what was happening. She was wrong about all of it. Marcus was a 4-year-old German Shepherd, 82 pounds, amber-eyed and so well-mannered in this house that neighbors assumed he had professional training. He didn't. He was just that kind of dog. He slept at the foot of the bed. He waited at the kitchen doorway during meals without being told. He had never once, in 3 years of living beside Eli's crib, shown anything but the kind of patience that made people say, "That dog is something else," which is why Tuesday morning made no sense at all. Eli woke cranky, which was not unusual. A mild ear infection the week before had left him slightly off balance. Sleep disrupted, quick to cry. By 8. In the morning, he was on the playroom floor, in his blue shirt, sobbing over a stacking toy that wouldn't cooperate. Ordinary. Manageable. Diane was 20 feet away in the kitchen with her coffee. Marcus came from the hallway at a pace she hadn't seen from him before. Not running, but purposeful. He crossed the room, lowered himself in front of Eli, and pressed his muzzle directly toward the boy's open, crying mouth. Close, 3 inches. His nose hovering at Eli's lips, drawing slow, deliberate breaths. Eli screamed louder. Marcus didn't move. Diane set down her mug. She had seen this in her classroom, an animal or person entering a child's space during distress and intensifying the response. She knew what overstimulation looked like. Marcus? Back. He pulled back, sat, watched. She picked Eli up. The crying slowed. She thought, that was strange. She filed it. She moved on. The second time happened that afternoon. Eli on the playmat, a smaller cry this time, just tired. Marcus came from behind the sofa like he had been waiting, lowered his head to Eli's face, and pressed his nose toward the boy's mouth again. Same thing. Same deliberate, focused inhalation. Holding position. Eli's face scrunching harder against the intrusion. Diane's husband Greg came downstairs and saw it from the doorway. What is he doing? She didn't have an answer she liked. She said, he keeps going for his face when he cries. Greg watched for a moment. Is he trying to lick him? No, she said. He's just holding his nose there, like he's smelling him. Neither of them said what they were both beginning to think. The third time was that evening. Eli in the high chair, fussing over dinner, a mid-level cry, not peak, just persistent. Marcus appeared at the kitchen threshold, walked directly to the high chair, rose on his rear legs, and brought his muzzle to Eli's face at chair level. Nose pressed toward Eli's mouth, holding. His eyes not on Diane, not on Greg, but locked on the boy's face with an intensity that did not look like affection. Greg pulled him back by the collar. Marcus turned his head and looked at Greg with an expression that Greg would describe later, in the hospital, as the face of someone who has just been interrupted while doing something that mattered. If you stay for stories about what animals sense before we do, you're in the right place. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one. They put Marcus outside after dinner. He sat at the back door without barking, which was somehow worse than if he had barked. Diane stood at the sink, looking at him through the glass. In 9 years of teaching, she had watched a lot of animals and a lot of children. She knew the body language of anxious, resource-guarding, and territorial behavior in dogs. What she was seeing didn't fit any of those categories cleanly. But she had a son to protect, and the pattern was undeniable. He went for Eli's face every time the boy was upset. She couldn't risk it. They closed the bedroom door on Marcus that night. He lay against it from the other side without making a sound. At 2:09 in the morning, Diane woke to nothing. No sound. The monitor on the nightstand was dark and silent. She checked it automatically. Green light. Recording. She turned over. At 2:14, Marcus hit the bedroom door. Once. Hard. Then again, Greg was already sitting up. Diane was already moving. She opened the door and Marcus went straight down the hall, straight to Eli's room, straight to the crib. And before she reached the doorway, she already knew from the quality of the silence inside that something was wrong. Eli wasn't crying. He wasn't asleep. He was lying still, eyes half open, a kind of limp stillness that her body recognized before her mind could form the word. She turned on the light. His face had the color of old wax. She picked him up and his body felt wrong in her arms, too loose, not the weight of a sleeping child. She told Greg to call 911. She said it twice. She used the flat voice she hadn't heard herself use since her nephew's playground fall 3 years ago. The paramedics arrived in 9 minutes. The first reading they got in the ambulance was a blood glucose of 34 milligrams per deciliter. Normal for a toddler is between 70 and 100. Has your dog ever done something that made no sense until it was the only thing that made sense? Tell us in the comments. These stories deserve to be heard. At the hospital, Dr. Priyananda Kumar, pediatric emergency, took the parents into a small room with 2 chairs and a box of tissues and told them what had happened. Eli had a glucose metabolism disorder, one of several rare but manageable conditions in which the body produces too much insulin in response to certain triggers. His levels had been dropping episodically, probably for weeks. The illness the week before had been a trigger, and the crying, the irritability, the fussiness, those were symptoms. His body signaling distress in the only language it had. She paused. She said, "Your dog was reading his breath." When blood glucose drops below safe levels in a child, the body produces specific volatile organic compounds in exhaled breath. Isoprene, acetone derivatives, chemical signatures that change concentration as the number falls. A German Shepherd's olfactory system, she explained, can detect those compounds at concentrations billions of times below what any human nose registers. Marcus had been pressing his muzzle toward Eli's mouth, not to threaten him. He was reading the number. Every time Eli cried, Marcus came because the breath was the signal. And the signal was getting worse. She looked at them directly. She said, "If you hadn't come in when you did, we would be having a very different conversation right now." Every guardian deserves to be recognized, even the ones who never asked for anything in return. If stories like this matter to you, subscribe so you never miss the next one. Diane went to the back door when they got home. Marcus was in the yard. She opened the gate and didn't call him. He came to her, and she put both hands on his face and held it. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. Eli is home now. He has a continuous glucose monitor on his arm, and a protocol and a pediatric endocrinologist who calls on Thursdays. His numbers are stable. His parents know what to watch for. Most nights the monitor does its job. Every night. Marcus lies in front of the crib doorway anyway, chin on his paws, watching the small green light blink in the dark. Because the numbers can always change, and he was always paying attention before any of them knew there was something to watch for. The next story involves a dog who changed his behavior 6 weeks before a diagnosis. No one in the family was ready for. Stay with us.